What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we are here with Mike of Darkest Hour. Thank you so much for your time today. It's great to finally make an interview happen with you.
What up, man? Welcome to the quarantine zone, dojo style. I'm here kicking it, Zoom interview tour. So here we are, man.
Yeah, I gotta say,
Thank you for talking about Darkest Hour. Thank you for spreading the word.
Yeah, of course. And I gotta say, you have the coolest setup out of any quarantine zone I've done an interview in. So.
Well, man, I can't wait till we move all of this shit around and set it up and rock for real. Hopefully that we could start doing that. But the dojo's been social distance style for so long now that I really some of this stuff needs to get dusted off back there. But
Yeah,
stuff I use is in the front. So just so y'all know.
But the first question I want to ask you, we kind of got to get this out of the way. But the last album is still Godless Prophets, right? So when can we be expecting a brand new full-length Darkest Hour album soon? Now that Godless Prophets is hitting the 4-year-old mark.
All right, let's talk about it. First of all, the 4-year-old mark sucks. It's definitely taken a long time. But man, the pandemic really, this is a bit of a snag. You know what I mean? If I'm not gonna lie, things have moved really slowly since we had to sort of regroup. But that sort of leads us to where we are today, which is that we have successfully had a year of our Patreon subscription service and released several limited vinyl downloads, videos. We got all that going on. So we've been building our infrastructure to be able to do possibly a new release this way. And also what we've been doing is using this activity to continue to fund it because we don't live together, okay? The last album was crowdfunded and then created, right? And then licensed to Southern Lord. So instead of signing a record deal, signing to a publishing company, which is something we don't think that we want to do, we rather self-fund album 10 so that we can be 100% in control of it creatively and in the product, holistically, Yeah. And whether we license it and distribute it through a record label, what we do after that is one thing, but we've been building our infrastructure to do it on our own if we need to, funding it. And so we're hoping that new music can come out, hopefully before the end of the year. Now, whether you're going to get an entire new album, I'm not sure because I don't know if it makes sense to put out all of our music as once as an album in your face like we did last time. Music's changed, and I just don't know if it makes more sense to put out a single or two, drop music along the way on the Patreon, work with the label to do small digital 7 inches, do split releases with people. I mean, the industry has changed a lot in a year.
Yeah.
How people buy music, how they listen to music, how they are entertained. I mean, a live stream concert over Zoom or whatever didn't even exist or anyone wouldn't have cared about it 1 year ago. You know what I mean? So it's taken us a minute to pull out album 10, but when you get up to album 10, you really have to ask yourself, why another album? And what do you have to say with another album? And that does get increasingly harder because you have the weight of the success you've created in the past, not haunting you, but dragging with you because people love those albums. They want to talk about those albums. They want to celebrate it. So I think when album 10 comes out, it will be when it needs to, and when it's right. And I think part of that is because I think it would be a disservice to the fans to just put out all of the music we've created and just let down the process that has given you Undoing Ruin, Deliver Us, Hidden Hands of a Sadist Nation, Godless Prophets, quality albums that feel like a complete thought thematically, visually, all that stuff. We don't want to lose that because of the way that things have changed. So we have to adapt, but we also have to make what we feel is like our best album. So,
Yeah. Well, it's
and
all
this shit ain't easy.
it'll
So that's
always
the
be worth
long answer, bro.
it'll always be worth the wait because like as a fan of Darkest Hour, like when you play me like, a song like Demons for example, which is still my favorite Darkest Hour song and then like
Okay, the hit.
yeah,
The hit.
one of them. But Antiaxis is
Okay.
another
Deep
song
cut.
that yep. And then you have a song like Love is a Weapon that's always fun to listen to. Like, it always seems like you channel so much emotion into your music. So, regardless if we get an EP or we get a full length or even a single, it's fair to say that,
Yep.
with being able to keep busy, with your live stream performances and everything, that world that we're living in is definitely going to play an influence on the new music that we get, right?
Sure. Oh, well, I mean, I don't see how it couldn't, but it's on the way. You know what I mean? I think the level of access that people have to musicians and everything through social media and through all these interviews I think it really numbs everyone to the fact that these albums take time and effort to create, and people's lives are shifting and other forces are at play. So, that's not an excuse. That's just a reality. And so we are artists and we're people. So we're kind of just surfing the wave of consequences as we try to make album 10, man.
Yeah, but it's so cool that you've still managed to keep busy. First off, I love the brand new guitar model, the brand new ESP model that we have coming out. It's so great to be able to get a signature Darkest Hour like guitar look because there's always such a look with Darkest Hour. I always get an image in my mind whenever I hear your music and stuff. So to have like a guitar that's associated with it, how did this guitar model sort of come to be with ESP?
Well, as you can tell, there's bunch of guitars here. I've been blessed enough to be able to play a lot of different shapes and a lot of different styles of guitars. And over the years, we've been fortunate enough to link up with ESP. It's been an honor to work with them. They are such a great company and very supportive of young artists. So they've worked with us for a long time. And as our relationship was developing, the Arrow design came out. That's this flying V design back here. You see the 3 white ones that I have right there. Those are the original prototype, the first one they sent me, and then the final version. We kind of went through, it wasn't that long of a process, but just the relationship we were with ESP for a long time. They came out with the Arrow. I sort of like had one that I destroyed trying to make how I wanted it. And after a while, they were like, hey, let's make you one the way you want it. You're playing it live all the time. And then we made it. It was a beautiful guitar. It was awesome. Then I played it live everywhere, played it on stage. And that's really how sometimes a signature guitar can be born, is it just becomes identifiable with the artist. And so I think after a while, after playing it, after seeing it in videos, there was enough of demand of like to get the style of V because it's pretty unique what's happening with it. What's happening with the wood, the scale, the color, the inlays. And I think so in a lot of ways, the fans and the internet helped make it happen as well as ESP. And now we all have these awesome instruments,
Yeah.
And I can't wait to get out there and play these motherfuckers on stage and shit with you people.
See, as somebody who it listens to Darkest Hour and could tell, what will be off of Undoing Ruin or The Human Romance or Deliver Us or the self-titled, etc. Like, I always feel like, every Darkest Hour album has its own distinct sound, both guitar work and lyrically. So, what do you look for in like your model guitar in order to get like that? Is it just because do you feel that the type of guitar that you have is the best for the Darkest Hour sound, or do you feel that it's just something you've always been comfortable playing and that's what you wanted to utilize for your career?
Well, I think the thing about it is that I don't want to pigeonhole this guitar that I have as a heavy metal guitar, but a lot of the decisions that were made about the guitar have to do with the fact that I play heavy metal with it. So I think in that sense, this guitar is utilitarian, and it's also sort of a work of love, like something I've kind of just always wanted. Like some of the cosmetic stuff, like the Olympic white and the inlays, are just a throwback to wanting the V to feel a little bit more classic. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with the sound, but I think if you're a person who runs around on stage, you're going to appreciate those big blocks when you're trying to see what's happening and you have a light show happening. you know, and but the wood, it's all mahogany, so it's a little bit heavier than a stock arrow, and the scale is a little bit smaller than the arrow. So the whole thing shifted. So if you're going to be doing long stretches, arpeggios, it just moves everything a little bit closer for your hand to be a little bit more comfortable and play that stuff a little bit clearer, you know. And then if you're a person who's trying to get this guitar and just have it be ripping right away, it's already stocked with like the James Hetfield pickup, which is like, in my opinion, the best pickup for heavy metal. I mean, it's not the best pickup in the world because best is relative depending on what you're trying to create. But if you're trying to create high gain heavy metal like a motherfucker, this pickup is perfect. That's why it's in there. And it's a Floyd Rose 1000. That's the high end Floyd Rose because this is meant to be used in a way where it's going to get wet, hopefully, and get used, you know. It's going to get moving around. It's going to get bumped around. So we want the quality Floyd. We want all the tuner keys to work well. I mean, I'm going to use this guitar live. I mean, I do have a custom shop, but the LTD, I've been using it all the time down here, giving it as much wear as I can. So I want it to be like the components to be able to be used a lot, you know, and not have to be cheaped down to bring the price down. So the guitar is not ultra cheap, but at the same time, when you buy this guitar, if you know what you're buying this for, you are definitely going to be happy.
Yeah, and I know that some guitarists they like to use the V bodies because they're lighter. I know that a lot of guitar players who also sing prefer the V models for that purpose. So like, I think it's really cool that you have like a guitar that you're able to kind of do whatever you want with it, and it fits perfectly for you.
Well, by the way, it isn't, for me, it isn't about being light. It's the fact that the offset V means when you stand up, you can rest the V on your leg when you're doing these intricate stuff and really support you. And then also if you're moving around, the offset isn't in front of your knee. So you don't end up moving the fretboard. You can keep it like this, but you can move forward and back. So it also helps make the guitar really mobile, you know. And if you're playing a single cutaway style guitar, you know, you got to do like a long stretch or a big thing up to the 22nd, 24th fret. If you do have a single cutaway that is up to 24, you still got to have to shift it like this to get all the way in there, you know. Sometimes in the V you don't have to shift like that because of the way it's designed. And so I encourage people to get one and put it on, stand up with it, and sit down with it, because I think it's misleading that V's are uncomfortable to sit and play with. So that's my spiel.
That awesome. You're fixing the V's reputation.
Yeah, the V does have a kind of a bad reputation. I'm gonna work on that.
Now, kind of going back, to what I've always admired about Darkest Hour too is really good, and you actually mentioned in the beginning of your interview, is that I've always thought that you guys have always really stayed true to your DIY roots. Like, I think when I hear of a DC metal band, I think of Darkest Hour, a band that originated in DC, you know, playing hardcore shows, playing like in metalcore shows and all that. And like, you've always stayed true to your roots, and I've noticed that you've been doing that now lately as well, right? It's fair to say that everything from your songwriting process to the way you guys have always handled business, that you've always stayed true to your DIY roots, right?
Well, I mean, we've been on 11 different record labels. And you could consider one or two of them a major label. So we've had our flirtations with non-DIY music. That's hella for sure. But we also have come from a culture here in Washington, D.C. of DIY punk and hardcore, and that's got such a long history that it really feels natural to us to do that with your band. You know, it's how we started. Like, we pressed our own demos, we pressed our own CDs, we passed out our own flyers, promoted our own shows. I mean, we're used to doing that. You know, we actually find comfort in that because then we can control that interaction and actually get to interact with people that are into it. Whereas when we've farmed that out and like become distant the way that you think a band should be and let other people handle it, it doesn't have the personal vibe that really drew people in the first place, you know? And so I think why we're at where we're at now is a combination punch of the pandemic in the world, meaning that every small business that wants to exist has to get small and get lean and get ready to fight to survive. So that's what Darkest Hour is. We are a small business that doesn't have a ton of overhead and a ton of employees. So, we're trying to just buckle down and do this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And really, I don't really think you can't even think of a better way to put it. You know what I mean? Like we're out here just trying to buckle down, be an entity, survive the wave of what's happening, and figure out how do you do the next chapter? Like what is the next chapter? And it does seem like controlling everything yourself is the beginning, and so we've built the infrastructure of Patreon and the subscription service, and now here we are again 25 years later, passing out flyers, only now it's social media posts, you know what I mean, giving out, selling demos, only this time it's a download code every time someone's a Patreon subscriber, but instead of being like ashamed that the major label Frolic did work out, we're trying to build an infrastructure that looks like we have an army of people working for us. We're totally used to the idea of like, people knowing like, yeah, this is how involved we are. We are DIY, we are a band that for all intensive purposes sets up our own equipment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then we rock your fucking face off.
And
you'll see a bunch of dudes roll over with Crude shirts on and shit.
And that's something that
we are the road crew, you know what I mean?
Well, that's something that I've always admired. Like when I saw you guys, like, for instance, playing Mayhem Fest 2014, bigger stages, or like when I saw you at Gramercy Theater in 2015. But like, it was hard to tell the difference between that and then the show you did at like St. Vitus, for example, because like, it just seems like the crowd interaction is always there. You're always there with the audience. Like, I don't care what size stage you're on. It just feels like it's not like I'm watching Darkest Hour play. It almost seems like I'm with Darkest Hour, you know what I mean? And I think that's why you've always maintained such a dedicated fan base even during these times.
That's cool. I mean, I think that's, I don't know how to put it better than you put it, but I like that because we sort of came from a scene of metal and hardcore where like you stood in the audience and watched the other bands, and then when it was your time to play, you like got on the stage, played, a lot of times on the same gear that the other bands played on. And then you got off the stage and then you watched the other bands and you all bought each other's merch and you talked to each other and you listened to each other's music. And so it's sort of an extension of that, where we aren't a band that likes to hide from our fans. We're a band that likes to go straight out, like, Bernie Mac style. We're not afraid of any of you, we're coming straight out of the backstage room to go right to the bar and do as many shots with whoever's there. I mean, at least that's how it was before COVID, and that's how we want it to be whenever we can get back to doing that. You know what I mean?
It'll happen. You can't stop us. We won't stop.
You can't stop shots, that's for sure.
You can't stop shots, and you can't stop the pit. And I've learned that the hard way at my first Darkest Hour show. And another thing I'm curious about is with your songwriting ability, because of the emotion that you channel into it, with the sound of the guitar and with the sound of the vocals. Like, is a lot of the albums that you have written, do you look at them as like a self-portrait, as like a personal representation of who you all personally are? Like, is it a representation of you and John and everybody in the band at that time, in a way?
I think that's a really good question that I don't know if anyone's asked me or asked me in a long time, but I just want to say, no, it's definitely not a self-portrait because of how much you have to give up to have it be a band. Like, to have 5, people, sometimes more, because you'll have a producer and you'll have all try to like agree on a song being done and what it has to say, means that you have to give up to the collective group in some way. Now, it's a lot harder for John on the lyrical vocal front because of the way of how much of what he says and what he says is interpreted as him, whereas guitar, we've had multiple different guitar players over the years, so you don't know who's exactly saying what. It's just said this is a Darkest Hour song or a riff, you know. So it's a tough thing to figure out how to wade and how to navigate, but it's not a self-portrait because we all sacrifice opinions about the way we think songs should go and parts should go and things should go. And you know, it's for the better sometimes, because when those arguments happen, different flavors kind of ooze into the album and the album becomes bigger, you know. Like when it's one voice, it's pretty pinpointed and it makes sense, but once you have a bunch of people in there throwing in stuff and churning it up, man, then it becomes really epic and you kind of forget you forget the one voice and it becomes like a chorus, you know, almost like layered guitars. You know?
And you have to speak multiple languages yourself too, because going back to Antiaxis again, like just starting off with that very clean guitar part, you kind of let the guitar sustain in the background, but then right after the cleans come in, he kicks in with the heavy parts. It almost seems like you have to adjust. It seems like every song has like multiple styles incorporated at once.
Well, that song's weird because it first of all, there's a lot of different versions of that particular song, and you can get the original demo version of that song with vocals from our Patreon. It's one of the demo songs. We release a new demo song every month, something from the past. So that version of Antiaxis that's on the Patreon is thrashier. It's a lot more classic Darkest Hour sounding. It doesn't have that sort of thing going on that almost sounds djenty in the vibe of the beat, Latin-y or whatever's happening. And also there's some things going on with the chorus, man. I remember we beat up that song with different changes and things. And in the end, I'm happy where it ended up because I like how different it is and how how it starts with the vocal things and the guitar thing. I mean, dude, that song has so many different beginnings, like different versions that existed because the Sumerian era, we recorded the album like so many times in different versions. But that song in particular is cool. It's a unique Darkest Hour song, and I do think it does pop out and for people who check out the self-titled album.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that, you know, people like it.
Yeah. In order to get like that inspiration for you to write, like it's kind of like two questions in one, but do you prefer to be in the company of your other bandmates when it comes up with new ideas, or do you prefer to kind of like be alone in isolation? And does inspiration sometimes strike when you least expect it?
It's hard, you know. Collective group writing when you're all just trying to make up an idea on the spot together is really a dangerous affair because it can end pretty badly when somebody liking somebody hating something. You know, jamming is harder. I think what the process we like is to get, you know, everybody's a home recording producer at this point and everybody's isolated. So people really like to put their ideas down in some electronic way and send it around so that when we show up, there's sort of a list of things we want to try to plod through and people know them. And then the fun is really like, hey, I have this riff. Hey, you know what the beat's supposed to be? It's like, yeah, but what about this? Or what about that? So we're not really making up a new riff. We're more like editing and revising together. Like almost like the first draft is created in isolation so that a person's thought can be heard. You know, like, it's super hard at a band practice to come up with an idea that you've never had before in front of everyone without them also playing their instrument at the same time or some shit, you know? So I preferred this process because it allows step A, which is idea be born, to be born without people shouting over you. But that is also let me just say that all of that is also totally bullshit because there is no one way to also do something. And so there have been a lot of good ideas that come like after you've jammed on an idea for a while and then so-and-so just starts playing a beat and you start riffing with it, or somebody starts playing a riff and they go, what's that? You know, I mean, it could be as much as like you start with a mission, re-edit, do something, but once your guard gets down and the flow gets happening, maybe something new is created out of nowhere. Or maybe a new part's created and later you go back and strip everything just down to that part, you know? But there are strengths and weaknesses to both processes. So again, I tend to just try to do as many different things so that I'm not afraid to go, oh, you want to try to make some up? All right, fuck it, you know? Or like, here's a bunch of ideas I had, or oh, you have a bunch of ideas, let me listen to them and come up with ways I could spin them. I mean, I like to be able to kind of play every position. That way, I feel like my brain expands and my overall vocabulary of ideas is bigger.
Hmm. And just playing, and you also played with Dream Shade recently, and are a very prolific artist as well. So maybe playing with different musicians and exploring different territories could broaden your horizons, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Fella from the band Dream Shade, he guest appeared on the live stream, and also so did Buzz from Unearth, Doc from God Forbid, Mark from Suicide Silence, Fred, our original second guitar player, and Chris Norris, our other second guitar player. Like, we have no shortage of guitar buddies who have ideas, and they're like, chicks, I mean, it's all about being in a culture and of dudes and being afraid to not being afraid to write with and collaborate with different people and try to add in different special sauces, if you will.
Yeah, and on top of that, like a lot of people, I've always hate like this on the periodic table of heavy metal subgenres, as I like to say. But like a lot of people have categorized you as metalcore because like with the singing and screaming sort of stuff, that hardcore vibe. Playing with Killswitch Engage and Unearth and God Forbid back in the day. Like you've always kind of been associated with that scene. I was curious to what to you makes metalcore because like people have told me, oh, it's music that has singing and screaming in it. I'm like, okay, does that make Opeth metalcore or Soilwork or Fear Factory?
Well, the metalcore, that is, I mean, sure, like any word salad now, it means anything. But I guess to the consciousness of Darkest Hour and the scene that we're from, it was not about singing. It was more about the combination of heavy metal and hardcore punk. So those things combine in a lot of different ways. They don't always have to combine in the same way. Maybe that's a death metal band that sings about women's rights. Or maybe that's a punk rock band that sings with a dude who has guttural death metal vocals. Or maybe it's a punk rock band that sings all punk rock, but then has blazing leads. You know what I mean? And then fast beats like Propagandy almost could be metalcore, but it's not. It's punk. But it's got a lot of shredding and metal in it. You know what I mean? Like you start blurring the lines and combining things, and that to us is metalcore. Like the combination of heavy metal and hardcore punk, and when you got those things, you also got a subculture. And I think that is another way that we've used, because what we mean by a combination of metal and hardcore is more about a subculture that's a combination of metal and hardcore, and so then you have the whole vegan straight edge movement that came out of it, and then you have like maybe later the whole like kind of more emo melodic metal movement that came out of it. But either way, like there was a different sort of subculture that existed outside of the big four heavy metal subculture, and that was also different too.
Yeah.
That was playing death metal in VFW halls with other bands that might not sound anything like you.
Yeah.
So to us, the combination is about the combination of metal and hardcore. We hid from the metalcore title forever because we're thrash metal, we're death metal, and now we're like, if you need a title to check us out, fine. And also, if we're dated by 2000s for some reason, and that is our genre, then fine. But the thing is, in 20 years from now, when we've still been putting out records and still exist, at some point we will just be like a heavy metal band, the way any band is that it's, transcends all the subcultures, and at the same time, we're always going to, some people, be a metalcore band, and it's fine.
Yeah.
I understand what metalcore means.
Yeah. And I think like people want to say it's a bad word. Like think about how many bands like you or Killswitch Engage or All That Remains or Unearth, like you guys have been able to play with like a variety of different bands, like you doing like a Mayhem Fest, but then like playing with, a band like Killswitch Engage, but then like, didn't you, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you do a Summer Slaughter one time?
Oh, I mean, but that isn't even, if you want to look at the spectrum of bands, Darkest Hour has toured with Cursive and Mike Park.
Yeah.
Anti-Flag, right? And then we've also toured with Belphegor, Cataclysm, Enslaved, Dying Fetus. Yeah, I mean, Black Dahlia Murder, Necrophagist, So we've been on super brutal death metal, black metal tours, and we've been on super punk rock, Warped Tour style tours, everywhere in the middle. That's what we like. We're kind of outcasts in both places. And over in the punk world, we're playing heavy metal and we look heavy metal. What the fuck? And over in the heavy metal world, like we're just annoying punk rock dudes. Why are we here? So it's like that's what we're used to.
And people
and now
will remember you.
The lines are blurred that there's so many people like us. It's like, oh fuck it.
Yeah.
Now we all just like music. So we like music with heavy metal guitars, double bass, screaming, and solos. That's basically it. That's what it is. You can call it whatever you want.
I've always said the future of metal is genreless.
Yeah.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's great to be able to talk with you. Is there just anything else with Darkest Hour that you would like to promote with the Patreon, and anything else that fans could support you during these times?
Well, first, thanks for having me on the podcast Zoom party. And also, thanks for taking the time to tell everybody about our Patreon, which we have going on right now, subscription service. We're doing video, music, physical items. We have a whole thing going on over there. You just pay one monthly fee and we are hooking everybody up. And it's sort of like our lifeline into everybody right now. We do have tours planned. We are working on album 10, like we talked about. So we're kind of have a lot happening in the world of Darkest Hour, and we're trying to funnel it in a way where people don't have to watch it through the white noise of social media and everything right now. So we encourage people to check us out on Patreon and party with us over there, and also understand that we've got a lot of different music that we're going to be putting out, coming out soon, and I've got the guitar happening, and so we appreciate everybody taking their time to check out all these, crazy Darkest Hour things we're trying to pull off in the middle of a pandemic, which we're also totally aware of, and again, appreciative that we are healthy enough to be able to do all this, and that there are a lot of people making sacrifices to keep this all going.
Yeah.
So that's my spiel. Thank you for having me on this motherfucker.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on this motherfucker.
It's almost 5 o'clock. We're going to do some shots around here and play some heavy metal, but
all right.
Glad we got to talk some heavy metal too, man. So.
Definitely. Everybody, Mike of Darkest Hour, be sure to support them on their Patreon. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time.